Today we're crocheting a wavy sweater. And I created this diagram to help you visualize this sweater, so please refer back to it if you need to. And for this project, I will be using Stylecraft's Life DK in the colors Silver Gray and Ice Blue. I used a total of about 200 grams in the gray and about 230 in the blue. And here's all the information on the label. And this is a DK yarn, but you can use any size yarn as long as you adjust the pattern. The link for this yarn will be in the description. I also used a 4mm crochet hook, some scissors, and a yarn needle. This sweater will be made up of 4 parts that we will stitch together, and the order that I made them is the back panel, then the front panel, and then the sleeves. First we'll need a slip knot, and to make a slip knot, lay the tail end of the yarn over the palm of your hand, and at the bottom you want to leave maybe 8 inches since this yarn is a little thinner. Then grasp the yarn with your thumb, grab the top, and wrap it around 2 fingers to form an X. Then use your hook and go under one side and over and grab the yarn, pull it through, remove your fingers, and tighten the knot. So here's our slip knot. Now we can start chaining the width of the ribbing. So to chain, yarn over and pull through. Again, yarn over and pull through. And we're just going to keep chaining until we get the width that we want. So I did a total of 10 chains, and then you want to do 1 extra chain at the end for every time you turn. So I actually did a total of 11 chains. And now we're going to start the ribbing, and we're doing it in half double crochets. So our first stitch is going to go into the second chain from the hook. So here's the first chain, here's the second chain. And to do a half double crochet, yarn over, insert your hook into the second chain from the hook, yarn over, pull through. Now you should have 3 loops, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops. Again, yarn over, insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. And by the end of your chain, you should have 10 half double crochets. And every time we finish a row, we're going to chain 1 and turn. And from now on, we'll only be working in the back loops only to create that ribbed effect. So to do a half double crochet in the back loop only, yarn over, insert your hook from the top and into the V of the first stitch and only catch the back loop, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through your 3 loops. Again, yarn over and insert in from the top, catching only the back loop, and complete your half double crochet. And we're going to do that all the way until the end, and make sure that you don't miss the very last stitch. It's a little bit hard to see, but you should always end with 10 half double crochets. So again, we're going to chain 1, turn, and start doing half double crochets in the back loops only again. And your number of rows will determine how wide your sweater will be. So I decided to do about half of my hip size. And you want to do a multiple of 8 rows. That's 8 times any number. So I did a total of 56 rows, which is 8 times 7. And you can do maybe 64 or 48 instead. And to count your rows, this ribbing creates a sort of zigzag up and down, and each up and each down is a row. And now we're going to start the first row of our back panel. So first we'll change to our gray color, and to do that, just loop it onto your hook and pull it through the loop on your hook, and then tighten the blue yarn. And you want to make sure that the gray yarn has enough yarn pulled through in order to weave that in later. And we're going to completely drop the blue yarn on this side and pick it back up once we get back to this side of the panel. And now we'll chain 1 and start the first row. And we're going to be working along the side of our ribbing. So the first row is just single crochets all the way across, and we're going to do 3 single crochets for every 2 rows. Here are the first 2 rows. Along the side of these 2 rows, we're going to do 3 single crochets. Here's the next 2, and we'll do 3 single crochets into those as well. So to do the 3 single crochets, I like to put 1 into the first row, 1 into the middle, and then 1 into the second row. So to do a single crochet, insert your hook into the side of the first row, and these don't have definite stitches, so it might be a little difficult. And if you want, you can carry your tail end in your stitches so you don't have to weave them in later. And make sure you drop the blue yarn off in the back. So after you insert your hook into the side of the first row, yarn over and pull through. Then you should have 2 loops on your hook, then yarn over and pull through those 2 loops. So this is your first single crochet. And again, to do your second single crochet, we're going to insert our hook into the middle of these 2 rows. And since this loop is always a little big and we don't want our piece to be holy, I like to grab the yarn under that too and go under those 2 loops, then yarn over and pull through, and then yarn over and pull through the 2 loops. Then we'll go into the side of the second row to do our last single crochet. So here you can see that we've only gone along the side of 2 rows, but we have 3 single crochets. In addition to the 3 single crochets every 2 rows, we're also going to add in 2 extra single crochets anywhere along the ribbing. So here I'll add in one of my extra single crochets, and then I'll add in the next one at the end. And then I'm going to move on to the next 2 rows, and I'm going to do 3 single crochets. So again, I'll go into the side of the first row and do a single crochet, and then I'll go into the middle and do a single crochet, and then into the second row and do my 3rd single crochet. And we're going to do that all the way across, and remember to add in your second extra single crochet near the end. And the number of single crochets that you should have is the number of ribbed rows that you made divided by 2 times 3 plus 2. So for me, I did 56 ribbed rows. So if you divide that by 2, you get 28, and then multiply it by 3, you get 84. Then add 2, you get 86. So I do have a total of 86 single crochets in this first row. And if you're off by like 1 or 2, you can just add those in at the end. Just make sure that you don't add too many single crochets into one spot. For the next row, we're going to do the wave stitch, and I'm going to pause and show you how to do that on its own since it has a lot of stitches in it. And you can follow along with this mini tutorial if you want, or you can just work it onto your next row. So first we'll do a slip knot, and this wave stitch is a sequence of 12 stitches. So we're going to chain 12. And since the first stitch is a single crochet, we'll chain 1 extra for the turning chain for a total of 13 chains. And the sequence is basically 2 of every stitch, and it's increasing and then decreasing in height. So our first 2 stitches are going to be single crochets. So do a single crochet starting in the second chain from the hook, and then do a single crochet in the next chain. And then a stitch that's a little taller is the half double crochet. So do a half double crochet into each of the next 2 chains. And then a little bit taller is the double crochet. And to do a double crochet, yarn over, insert your hook into the chain, yarn over, pull through, then yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And again, do another double crochet, yarn over, insert your hook into the chain, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And then the tallest stitch is the treble crochet. And to do that, we're going to yarn over twice, insert our hook into the next chain, yarn over, pull through, and now we have 4 loops on our hook, and we're going to yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And again, the treble crochet, we're going to yarn over twice, insert our hook into the chain, and yarn over, pull through 2, 3 times. And now we're going to start decreasing back down. So if you remember, it's the double crochet next, and we're going to do 2 double crochets, then it's 2 half double crochets, and that's the end of our wave stitch. And these 12 stitches can be repeated over and over, starting from the single crochet. Now let's do the wave stitch for our second row. And for the wave stitch in gray, we're going to chain 1 and turn to start the row. So now we're going to be doing the wave stitch like I showed you before, and we're going to be building up the stitch height and then dropping back down. So again, it's 2 of every stitch, starting from single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet, treble crochet, then going back down to double crochet, and then ending with half double crochet. And then we're going to restart the sequence starting with 2 single crochets again. We're going to do this wave stitch until the very last 2 stitches, and in those last 2 stitches we'll do 2 single crochets to finish off this row. So here I've finished the wave stitch all the way across, and I ended up with 7 waves. And now we're going to change to the blue yarn to start the next 2 rows. So again, to change the color, drop your gray yarn to the back, then pick up your blue yarn and yarn over and pull it through your loop. And then we'll tighten with the gray yarn, and we'll chain 1 and turn. And like we did with the gray, we're first going to do a row of single crochets. And now we're going to start our wave stitch row in the blue. And with our second color, we're actually going to start in the middle of a wave. So we'll chain 3 and turn. And we're going to start with 2 treble crochets. And then we'll decrease with 2 double crochets, then 2 half double crochets. And here's where that wave pattern continues, starting with single crochets. And you'll notice that each of these peaks is where the single crochets will go. And we're just going to continue this wave stitch all the way until the end, and we will end with the 2 treble crochets. And we're going to repeat these 4 rows until we get the length that we want. And this length is going to be up to the base of our neck, but minus the width of the ribbing. So make sure you do a little less than the base of your neck. So we'll change back to gray, and I do the opposite with my blue yarn. I drop it to the front instead of in the back. And the side that you drop it on doesn't matter too much, but it will help your yarn from tangling. And then we'll do a row of single crochets, and then a row of wave stitches, and then we'll change back to blue, do a row of single crochets, and then a row of wave stitches. So just remember that for the wave stitch row, in gray we're going to do a chain 1 and then start with single crochets. But for the blue, we're going to chain 3 and start with our trebles. So for me, I did a total of 32 color changes, and I ended on the blue, which is my second color. And if you end on your first color, that might change the pattern just a little bit, but the concept is the same. And for reference, my back panel so far is 41 centimeters long, and that's including the ribbing at the bottom, which is 4 centimeters. Now let's work on forming the neckline. So we're going to separate the top into 3 parts. The middle part, which is where your neck fits, and then the 2 side parts, which we're going to continue crocheting to form the neck hole. So to do this, we're going to start crocheting the next row, but stop where we want the neck to be. So I'm going to portion out these 2 waves in the middle to be the neck part, and I'll change to my gray to start the next row. And then I'll start the single crochet row and stop when I get to those 2 waves. And I stopped at 29 single crochets. So here I stopped at the 2 waves, and I'm going to leave 3 stitches. So that includes the half double crochet and then the 2 single crochets. And over these 3 stitches, I'm going to do a single crochet 3 together. So that combines those 3 stitches into 1. So to do that, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull through, then insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull through, and then insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, and now you should have 4 total loops on your hook, and we'll yarn over and pull through all 4 loops. So this is a single crochet 3 together, and we're going to do this at the end of every single crochet row. Now instead of chaining first, we're going to turn first, and then we're going to look at the last wave stitch we did in gray, and that will tell us which stitch we'll do next. So if you look down at that last row, you'll see that our next stitches will be double crochets. So they would normally be the treble crochets, but since we combined those 3 stitches into 1, we're now removing those 2 treble crochets and we're going to start with the double crochets. So first we'll chain 2 and then do our double crochets. And then we'll continue the pattern with half double crochets, single crochets, and so on. If you're unsure of which stitch you should be doing, like if you should be increasing the height of the stitches or decreasing, just look at the last wave stitch row in that color, and the type of stitch that should go into your next stitch will be exactly in line with that last wave stitch row in that color. And once we finish our gray row, which should always end with single crochets, we're going to switch to the blue color again and do a single crochet row. And remember, at the end of every single crochet row, we're going to do a single crochet 3 together. So you can see here I stopped 3 stitches before the end, and we're going to do a single crochet 3 together. So insert your hook into the next stitch and yarn over and pull through, and then do that 2 more times, and you should have 4 loops on your hook, then yarn over and pull through all 4 loops. So this removes the last 2 stitches, and we're going to turn again, look down at the last wave stitch row in blue, and you can see that it should be a half double crochets, but since we removed the last 2 stitches, we're going to start with 2 double crochets. So we'll chain 2 and do 2 double crochets, and then 2 treble crochets, and continue the pattern. And you should see that this strip doesn't go straight up, it starts to form an angle for the neckline, and that's because we're doing the decreases with the single crochet 3 together. And you should continue doing these rows until you get the width of 1 shoulder. So I ended up doing a total of 5 color changes for forming the neckline, and you can do more or less depending on how wide you want the shoulder part to be and how far down you want it to hang on your shoulders. So that's all for this side, and we're going to cut off our yarn, but first I want to estimate how much yarn we'll need to slip stitch the top. So when we assemble the 2 pieces together, we're going to slip stitch the tops of the shoulders. And to estimate how much yarn we'll need, I'm going to slip stitch across this one top by itself, and then I'll cut off my yarn from there. So to slip stitch, I've already turned my work and chained one. We'll insert our hook, yarn over, pull through, and pull through the loop on our hook. Again, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through, and pull through the loop on your hook. And I'll also include about 8 inches for the tail end. And then I'll cut it here, and this should be how much yarn I'll use. Now we can take out our hook and unravel these slip stitches. And if you just want to cut it, then it ended up being about 5 times the length of the top. And now we're going to tie it into a knot so it doesn't come undone. So I like to pull on the loop and then use the remaining yarn and tie it into a knot. And now we'll save this for later on once we finish the front panel. But for now, let's do the next side of the neckline. So first we'll flip our panel so that our finished side is on the right and we're working on the left side. Then we'll grab our gray yarn and attach it to the middle of the panel. So to attach our yarn, we're first going to make a slip knot like we did in the very beginning. And then we're going to insert our hook at the end of those 2 waves in the middle. Make sure that you include the 2 single crochets. So insert your hook into the single crochet on the right. Then with your hook, pull the yarn in through that stitch and through the loop on your hook. And make sure everything is tightened. And then we'll chain 1. And since we're working on the side where the neck is supposed to be, we're going to do a single crochet 3 together, starting with that same stitch that we attached our yarn to. Also, don't forget to carry your yarn through these stitches if you don't want to weave it in later on. So once you do your single crochet 3 together, we're just going to single crochet all the way across. So this side is slightly different from the other side. Instead of ending every single crochet row with a single crochet 3 together, we're going to be starting every row with the single crochet 3 together. And once you finish your single crochets, we're going to chain 1 and turn. And then we're going to work our wave stitch row, starting from the 2 single crochets in the gray. So working on this side of the shoulder part is much easier than the other side because we're always going to start with single crochets in the gray, and then for the blue we'll always start with trebles like we did with the earlier rows. And it's easier because you don't have to keep referencing the last row of your wave stitch to figure out which stitch goes next. And once we finished our last stitch on top of that single crochet 3 together from the last round, we can switch to the blue yarn by pulling the yarn through the loop. And also make sure you have a good enough tail end. And then we're going to chain 1 and start our single crochet row with a single crochet 3 together, and then do single crochets all the way across. And like I mentioned earlier, we're going to chain 3 and then start the wave stitch with the treble crochets. And once you finish this side of the shoulder, it should look like this. And we can actually cut off our blue yarn now, or you can leave the blue yarn attached to crochet the collar later on, but you can also do that with the front panel instead if you want. So this gray yarn that we have attached right now is also going to be used to slip stitch the tops of the shoulders. So I'm going to use the other side where we cut off the yarn and use that yarn that we estimated to cut off this yarn. And then I'll tie them both back into a knot so that they don't unravel. And now we're going to work on the front panel. So the front panel will start the same exact way as the back panel. We're going to start with a slip knot and then chain 11 and half double crochet 10. And then we're going to do the same number of rows that we did for the front panel. And for mine, I did 56 rows. So for my front panel, I ended up doing 27 color changes. And this should go up to below the base of the front of your neck, and also minus the ribbing. So right now the length of my front panel is 36 centimeters, and again this includes the bottom ribbing, which is 4 centimeters. So like we did with the back panel, we're going to portion out the middle for the neck part to start. So we're just going to be doing the exact same thing, but this time we're starting with our blue yarn. So with our blue yarn, we're going to chain 1 and turn and do our single crochet row, and we're going to stop at our last 3 stitches. So here we've gone across and stopped before our last 3 stitches, and that's including the double crochet and then the 2 treble crochets. And just like I did with my back panel, I stopped at 29 single crochets. And then over these next 3 stitches, we're going to do a single crochet 3 together. And just like we did for the back panel, we're going to turn and then look at our last wave stitch in the same color, which is blue. And we're just going to look straight down and line up our stitches. And if you have the exact same numbers as me, then you should chain 1 and do 2 half double crochets and then continue the wave stitch. So now you want to do the exact same number of color changes that you did for the back panel. So I did 5 color changes for my shoulder part, and I did that here too for my front panel. And then once you're done with that, you want to add in extra rows without decreasing. So without single crocheting 3 together on the inside. Since I did 27 color changes for the body on my front panel and 32 for my back panel, I'm still missing 5 more color change rows. So I'm going to add that at the top without decreasing the sides. So it should go straight up instead of at an angle like we have been doing. And it works the exact same way. Instead of single crocheting 3 together, we're just going to do 3 single crochets. And this allows the front panel to hang a little lower so it's not so tight on your neck. And once you're done with the shoulder parts, you can just cut your yarn about 8 inches. And now we're going to work on the sleeves. So first we're going to do our ribbing. So again, it's 11 chains and 10 half double crochets, but this time we're going to do rows until it can fit around our wrist. And for this one, we're doing a multiple of 4 rows. So I did 24 rows, which is 4 times 6. And it's supposed to fit around your wrist like this. And now we're going to be doing 3 single crochets for each ribbed row. And we'll also add in 2 extra single crochets, 1 near the beginning and 1 near the end. So I'm going to switch to my gray yarn and start the first row. And if you want to make sure that the sleeve fits you the way that you want it to, then you can use your front or back panel as a gauge. When you fit 3 single crochets into a single row all the way across, then it should look like this. And to figure out how many stitches that you should have, you take your number of ribbed rows, multiply it by 3, and then add 2. So I did 24 rows, multiplied by 3, that is 72, and then add 2, that's 74. And now we're going to be repeating those same 4 rows that we did for the front and back panels. And remember that the gray will always start with single crochets and end with single crochets, and the blue will always start with trebles and end with trebles. And just continue these rows until you get the sleeve length that you want. And I usually go all the way up until it goes to my underarms, but you can make it longer for a baggier sleeve or shorter for a shorter sleeve. So I did a total of 35 color changes in my sleeve, and that was a total of 45 centimeters including the ribbing. Now we'll fold it in half so we can stitch down the side and form the tube. So first we're going to make sure that the wrong side of the sweater is facing out. So the wrong side is whichever side you like less, and I chose the wrong side to be where we face the back of the wave stitches. So we have the wrong side facing out because once we stitch up the side, we're going to turn it inside out. And we'll be stitching with the gray yarn so we can cut off our blue yarn so it's out of the way. And then we'll rotate our sleeve so we can work right to left. To start slip stitching, we're going to insert our hook into the side of the flap that's closer to us. And then we'll go over to the other flap and insert our hook into that side. And then we'll yarn over and pull through the loop on our hook. Then we'll move on down the sleeve into the next stitch on the flap closer to us, then over and into the other flap, yarn over, pull through the loop on our hook. As you're working your way down the sleeve, you want to make sure that the waves are always lining up with each other and that you don't put too many slip stitches or too little, because too many can cause it to curve and flare out along the seam, and too little slip stitches can make it bunch up. So just try to space them out evenly. I did about 2 slip stitches for every gray color change and about 3 or 4 for every blue color change. So I've gone down the side and now we'll do the ribbing. So we'll go into the first bump on the flap closer to us, and then we'll count out the 10th stitch and go in from the top into that V and catch the back loop. Then we'll do our slip stitch and move on to the next stitch. So we'll go into the next bump and over into the V, grab only the back loop and finish our slip stitch. And we're going to do that until we have 10 slip stitches along our ribbing. Once we're finished slip stitching the entire side of the arm, we can fasten off by chaining 1 and then cutting our yarn about 8 inches and then pulling the yarn with our hook and tightening the knot. Now we can turn the sleeve inside out, and this is how it should look. And remember that when we sew it to the body, we're going to have the seam on the bottom, so it's folded like that. And also it will be inside out, so we'll turn it inside out before we sew it to the body. So now we'll make one more sleeve and then we can start stitching everything together. So first let's start stitching the tops of the shoulders together. So I have my back panel laid out and then my front panel on top of that, and I have the right side out. So again, my right side is where the wave stitch is facing the right way. And remember that when we're stitching the pieces together, we want the wrong side to be on the outside. So I'm going to flip the top panel up and over, and then I'm going to stitch the tops of the shoulders. And we're starting with the right side, and we'll first untie the knot that we've left there. And now we can insert our hook and start slip stitching. And for this part, we're going to go into the first stitch under both loops on the flap closer to us, then over and into both loops on the last stitch on the other flap. Then we'll do our slip stitch, and then we'll move on to the next stitch. So just go under both loops on both stitches, starting from the flap closer to us, then over to the flap further from us. And once you reach the end, the tops of your shoulders should be fully connected and the seam should look something like this. And then the other side should look like this. Now we can fasten off by chaining 1 and pulling through with our hook. And we should be left with a good amount of yarn to weave in later. Now let's do the same thing for the other shoulder seam. Now that we've finished both shoulder seams, we can start working on the collar. So here's how it looks right now. And now I'm going to open it back up with the right side facing up and work on the collar. So if you remember earlier, we left the blue yarn attached to the back panel, and that was for making the collar. So if you didn't leave your yarn attached, then just do a slip knot and attach your yarn like I showed you before, and it can be attached to any part along the neckline. So here's my blue yarn, and I'm going to insert my hook into the stitch at the base of the yarn, and then I'll yarn over and pull through, and chain 1. And now we're going to do a row of single crochets along the neckline. So I'm just going to place my single crochets as if there were actual stitches here. And you want to space them like this, otherwise if you put them too close together then the neckline will start to flare out. And if you put them too far apart, then the neckline will start to bunch up. And once you've done single crochets all the way around, we're going to close this round by slip stitching to the first single crochet we made by going under the V of the first single crochet and doing a slip stitch. And now here is what the neckline looks like. You can see that everything is laying flat and single crochets aren't bunching up or flaring out. And now we're going to start the ribbing for the collar, which is the same ribbing that we did for the bottom of the front panel and the back panel. This ribbing is going to be worked a little bit differently, and if you want you can just work up that ribbing and then sew it on, but here is how I like to do my ribbing. We're going to chain 11, which is the same length that we chain for the ribbing. Once we have 11, we're going to half double crochet 10 across, starting with the second chain from the hook. So again, this is the start of the ribbing that we've made for the cuff and the bottoms of the front and back panels. Now that we've done our first row of ribbing, we're going to slip stitch it into our first round of single crochets that we did earlier. And the first slip stitch we'll do is a slip stitch 3 together. So we're going to go into that single crochet at the very base, then yarn over and pull through, then insert a hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull through, then into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, and we'll pull that loop through the 3 loops on our hook. And then we'll slip stitch into the next stitch over. So now we have this slip stitch 3 together, which attached our first row to the neck, and then we slip stitch 1 over to start our next row. So now we'll turn and start the next row of ribbing. So here is our first 2 stitches, but those are our slip stitches, so we're going to skip that. Then we'll yarn over, insert our hook into the 3rd stitch, and start a row of half double crochets. And if you're unsure of which stitch to start in, then count 10 half double crochets from the end. And once we're finished with our second row, we're going to chain 1 and turn. So usually I turn this way, but now I'll actually turn the other way to avoid having to turn the entire project. So just turn this way and then complete 10 more half double crochets. And your 10th half double crochet is always going to be a little hard to see, but make sure that you don't miss it. And once you've done your 3rd row, we're going to slip stitch again. So remember, the first one we do is a slip stitch 3 together. So again, insert your hook into the next stitch, pull through, insert your hook into the next, pull through, insert into the next, pull through, and pull that loop through your 3 loops. And then we'll do another slip stitch and start the next row. And remember to skip the first 2 V's, those are the slip stitches. So we're going to continue doing this all the way around, but at these 8 corners, we're actually going to do a slip stitch 4 together instead of a slip stitch 3 together. And the reason for this is these corners you need to combine more stitches so you have less ribbed rows so they don't flare out. So here we're going to pull up a loop in the next 4 stitches and use that last loop to pull through the 4 loops on our hook, and then we'll do a slip stitch. So if you want to customize it and make your collar even tighter, then you can do a slip stitch 4 together all the way around instead of 3. But for this pattern, I will be doing slip stitch 3 together all the way around, except for those 8 corners where I will be doing slip stitch 4 together. And always check to make sure that your ribbing is laying flat. If it's sticking up, then that means you might have too many rows, so slip stitch more stitches together. And once we get to the end, we can slip stitch the collar closed. First, let's chain 1. Then in the flap closer to us, we're going to go in from the side and up through the front loop. Then we'll go over to the other flap and go under the last bump on the end. And we're going to do the 10 slip stitches across. And now your collar should look something like this. And now we can fasten off by chaining 1, cutting our yarn, and pulling the yarn through with our hook and fastening the knot. Now here's what my project looks like so far, and to attach the sleeves, we're going to turn this inside out once again. So here's the back and here is the front, and you can tell because the collar is hanging a little lower. And here is our sleeve that we will be attaching to the side, and you want to make sure that your sleeve is turned inside out as well. So that means the seam is visible. And then we're going to fold it along the seam so the seam is on the bottom. And this part is optional, but I will be using these safety pins to pin the sleeve to the body to make sure that everything is lined up properly. First, I'll attach the pin to the top of the sleeve, and then I'll attach that to the top of the body where the shoulder seam is. And I couldn't find mine, but if you have bobby pins, then they might be more helpful to hold the pieces closer together. And then I'll add another safety pin to pin together the front and back panel just under the sleeve. And when you're stitching everything together, make sure that your waves line up. So I'm pinning just above the gray wave on both the front and the back panel. And you can continue to add more pins if you want, but let's get started stitching. So we're going to start from the underarm, connect the top of the sleeve with the top panel, then go towards the back, and we'll connect the back of the sleeve with the back panel. Then we'll continue down the side of the body and connect the back and the front panel together. First, we're going to attach our yarn. So grab either color and make a slip knot. Then we'll rotate our project so we can work right to left. Then we'll attach our yarn by inserting our hook into the top panel, then inserting our hook into the sleeve. And we'll pull the yarn through everything, including the loop on our hook. And now we can start slip stitching across by inserting our hook into the top panel, then over and into the sleeve. And we'll go all the way along trying to make sure that everything is laying flat and that we reach the top of the sleeve at the same time we reach the shoulder seam. Once we reach the top, we can remove the safety pin and stitch up the top and turn our work to start working along the back. And now we will be transitioning from the sleeve and the back panel to connecting both the back panel and the front panel. And just work your way down, and every few rounds make sure that your waves are lining up. And when you reach the ribbing, it will be the same as when we attached the ribbing for the sleeve. And at the end, fasten off. And here's how my seam is looking, and here's how the right side looks. Now we can start the next sleeve, and don't forget to make sure that your sleeve is turned inside out. Once both sleeves are attached, we can now turn the sweater inside out. So here's how my sweater is looking, and now we have these loose ends to weave in. So first, what I like to do is use my hook to pull all of the loose ends to the inside of the sweater. Now I'll show you how to weave in your ends. So grab your yarn needle and thread a loose end into your needle. And with our needle, we're going to go under these loops in one direction. And you want to make sure that your needle isn't poking through too much on the other side. And once you've gone up a couple inches, you can pull your yarn through, and then we're going to be working in that direction that we just came from. So first we'll go under a loop to the side, and then we'll go back the direction we came from. Then we can pull our yarn through, and if you have some extra, you can do that once again. And once you're done, you can snip off the excess yarn. And once we secure all of our loose ends, we are done. And this is our final product. And here's a quick try on of the sweater. I really liked how the color turned out, and here is the back. This sweater turned out super cozy, and I hope you guys like it as much as I do. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Also comment any questions or suggestions that you have. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.